morning. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Kwagala, your host. Under the 1995 constitutional framework, the Parliament is identified as a vanguard for the Constitution's protection. On today's edition of Focus on Parliament, we assess the performance of Parliament in the execution of this critical responsibility, even as our country's constitution marks its 30th year anniversary. I am now joined by a panel of distinguished personalities whom I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce to you, our esteemed viewers. Let me start from my far left. Is Professor Ndebesa, a renowned academic and a political commentator. Prof, you're most welcome to the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you. Good morning to you. Good morning to the viewers and panelists. And I'm glad to be here in this virtual space to share views of national significance as we build the nation.
It's always a pleasure, Prof.
Thank you.
Next to Professor is Timothy Chemonges, the Associate Director for the Center for Policy Analysis and the Parliament Watch. Dogu, you're most welcome to the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, Isaac. Good morning to our viewers. Glad to be here. Looking forward to a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed. And of course, last but not least, is Mr. Eliakim Atumanya Kapson, who is a lawyer, a managing partner at Eliakim and Company Advocates, and an aspiring member of Parliament for Kwagala County in Tungamo District.
Yeah.
You're most welcome to the program, Mr. Kapson.
Thank you very much, Isaac. Good morning, viewers. I'm glad to be here. Managing Director at Eliakim and Edison Advocates. Thank you so much for that introduction. And we look forward to have an interaction with our viewers today.
Many thanks indeed. Thank you for joining us. Prof, let me start with you. 30 years of our country's constitution is quite a milestone, given that we are still a nascent and a somewhat struggling democracy. We could debate the merits as to whether we have lived up to the promise of the Constitution itself. Of course, you will tell us on the program. But I want to ask the question. You were a part of the Constitution making process in 1995. What motivated you to place Parliament at the center of the protection of this important document?
Thank you for that question, but correction, please. You seem to be saying that I was a CA delegate. I was not a CA delegate, so I don't know those who were making the constitution, what they had in mind. Me, I was just attached to them as a researcher. And as a researcher, mine was to give information and data, and I stopped there. What the shape of the constitution was shaped by those who are inside the CA. Your question specifically was about what?
What could have motivated Parliament to place Parliament at the center of the protection and promotion of the Constitution?
I am not very sure whether Parliament was put there, although it has a prominent space there in that Constitution. But otherwise, I think some of the powers that Parliament arrogates itself are hijacked from the people. Because the Constitution says power lies with the people. And I don't know how much of power lies with the people. I don't know how much the Constitution and the Parliament has done to put power in the hands of the people. We are talking about here the real power, not the ideal power that is theorized. That this hypocrisy, if I can use that extreme word, it is a hypocrisy that power lies with the people. In which way is power lying with the people? The power to do what? I think some scholars have divided power into three categories. There is visible power, there is hidden power, there is invisible power. And I don't know how much of the hidden and invisible power that the people have, or even the constitution has, and even that parliament has. Because we must distinguish between the formal issues, the formal documents, what is written down and what is practiced, or what is written down and what is internalized in the hearts of the people, which is and that which is internalized, how it is expressed in actions when we are interacting. Because you say that power lies with the people, or there is a parliamentary sovereignty, and you would say that maybe parliament has the powers, for example, to censure the president, and yet the president has no power, for example, to prorogue parliament. But it is the other way around. If the president today wanted to prorogue parliament, he does not have to do it formally in the normal procedures. All he needs is to do is tell the speaker to, they call it what? Postponing parliament is what?
Adjourn.
Adjourn parliament, is it Sunday, whatever, there is that Latin word. Sunday. And there we are until we go for elections, because what would the speaker do? Some speaker whom we saw the other day kneeling before the president at a public rally and confessing that you are the one who made me and you are the one who knows me, and to demonstrate that one, let me even kneel down for you. That shows you that the official formal powers that are in the constitution are not exactly those which are practiced. Because you can't tell me that parliament is sovereign and has got powers. They don't even have powers to censor a minister. They have censored ministers, but the ministers have remained and nothing has happened. They just keep quiet. So they are under captivity. Parliament is under captivity. There is no sovereignty of parliament. As I said before, the performance of parliament is determined by its history. Has it struggled to get out of the armpit of the executive? Because we can use the live example of the ongoing case of Besigye. I think the judiciary and the parliament are powerless, because I think parliament, the judiciary came up to say that civilians should not be tried in military courts. Was it a constitutional court?
Yes.
There you are. They are still being tried there, and I think there is a case in the Supreme Court.
Yes, pending
For the last 4 years.
Yes.
And the judiciary is doing nothing. The Supreme Court and the Chief Justice is doing nothing. That shows you that the Constitution is powerless, more or less. And sometimes I quote Museveni. I'm somehow a Musevenist, and I think there is a video clip that was trending at one time during the elections, where President Museveni, he was somewhere in Western Uganda, I think in Ankole sub-region, because he was using Runyankore. And he did say that I'm going to say it in Runyankore, to translate it, In that video, he was telling people that abantu barero bagira ngunjende. Ngundi yo nimba vuga nkakahuba. Rero hati ndiyo nimba vuga nkakahuba tumwine chimkwekora rero kunda agende nabo hoki. Something like, I am pushing you like a wheelbarrow, meaning we citizens. And if he is not there,
what will happen?
Nothing will go ahead, because I am pushing you. So, in that pushing on the people in the kahuwa, in the wheelbarrow, is parliament. It is also being wheeled there. So it can't do much when it is under the wheel and being wheeled. And when he was asked at one time, there was a debate as to why there should be 10 members of the army in parliament. Since after all, members of UPDF or the army are part of the executive. and the executive shouldn't be directly in parliament like that. And his justification was that, you see, those are there as listening posts. And military language listening post is somebody supposed to spy on the enemy. So you have 10 members of UPDF in parliament spying on members of parliament and writing reports to the executive to take action. So if you are a member of parliament from the ruling party and you have a listening post beside you in parliament, and you know when he reports you the consequences during another election will be nasty, so you have to keep in line. So the supremacy of parliament is not something that you proclaim in a constitution by writing it down. The sovereignty and the supremacy of parliament must be struggled for. It is not something in abstract that you just declare it, that the parliament is supreme and will protect this constitution. It must be struggled for, so that you have the space that you got yourself, and you have the hidden power. A hidden power is the power to set the agenda. I normally say that parliament doesn't make laws. I don't know, even the lawyer is here is going to clarify to me whether the constitution says that the parliament makes laws or parliament passes laws. See, there is a difference between passing laws and making laws.
It actually states that it will make laws for the good governance
of the country. But in most
That's
cases,
the text.
They pass the laws of the bills that come from the executive. And in a case, the laws of Uganda, you are two lawyers here, you will explain to me, are laws in the country made only by parliament? Because I thought that we are under common law. And under common law, I think that presidents of lawyers, of judges, make laws, isn't it?
That's the idea, yes.
And two, we have customary law that is not made in parliament. And three, we have got statutory instruments, which in effect are regulations, but they are law in a sense. And those are by ministers. So you find law is not only made by parliament. There are other sections of government that also make the law. But anyway, that parliament is supreme, is sovereign in Uganda is a myth. It is not true. And when you look at the history of Uganda, if I can be given some 2 minutes, is that Uganda is Uganda as a country is about 130 years old. But since the colonial period, when the Legislative Council, which was equal to Parliament, was instituted in the 1920s, the Parliament, or the legislature for that matter, was just an extension of the executive, an arm of the executive. After all, even this kind of the Speaker of Parliament was the governor. You see, that history of 68 years, when the governor was the Speaker, set a precedent, created values, created a system where the executive controls parliament. Then we had the Parliament of Independence, the first parliament, which was dominated by the ruling party, because even if UPC had not got the majority seats in the parliament, or it had defeated the DP and KY, but it didn't have an absolute majority. But when KY joined it, and later on KY dissolved itself, and then the 1966 constitution was abrogated, parliament began to be an arm of the executive. Idi Amin did not pretend to rule with the constitution and parliament. He dealt away with both of them. When UNLF came into power, we had the National Consultative Council as parliament. That is the only parliament that had liberated itself from the executive, because it is the only parliament actually which censored the president, i.e. president ruling. But it then put there Binaisa. Now, Binaisa lasted for only 11 months and was overthrown by the military, what part of the executive. From that time again, Parliament became a captive of the executive. Actually, even during the first 10 years of NRM, President Museveni was a speaker. So President Museveni is a former speaker of the Parliament of Uganda, because effectively, legally, he was the speaker or the chairman of the National
Resistance Council.
Resistance Council, and until 1995 Constitution. So in a way, there is a way the executive was the speaker. But even if it is not, if a speaker can kneel before the president, the member of the executive, that symbolic action demonstrates to you how the parliament or the legislature in Uganda is not independent, and therefore cannot set the agenda in Uganda, cannot enforce its resolutions of parliament, and does not even have what we call invisible power, that is the power to influence and shape the events in the country in such a manner that when you don't listen to what parliament does, it has a political cost to you. There is no political cost to any party in Uganda because of parliament. In that case, I don't see its primacy, and I don't see its central role as a shaper and mover of constitutionalism in Uganda.
Tim, Prof paints quite a gloomy outlook of Parliament with respect to its mandate of protecting the Constitution. But from a governance standpoint, what would be your appraisal of Parliament in the protection of the Constitution for the last 30 years of its lifetime?
So maybe I should start from a point that Parliament enjoys a very special position in our Constitution, at least specifically the 1995 Constitution. And looking at the 1995 Constitution from a premise where it gives and places the people at the center of it, and allows and actually asks the citizens to protect that Constitution. Of course, establishing other institutions like Parliament and the other, but also more importantly, emphasizing that the people, through their representative, shall at all point in time ensure that they guard this Constitution. Now, the assumption at that point in time was that you will have Parliament that is independent, that is free of coercion, and that can objectively look at the matters of the country in a more objective way. And goes ahead to actually say that among the other roles that this institution will play would be to make laws for the peace, order, development, and good governance of the country, with the assumption that it's going to exercise the independence that the Constitution gives it. But also goes ahead to presuppose that the leadership of these institutions would be independent enough to exercise the powers that they have been granted in a manner that aligns with the 1995 Constitution. Unfortunately, looking at our history, where we've had a very very unique history that has been characterized by wars, overthrows, and not so very interesting experience. And with the coming of the 1995 Constitution, I think that with the comparison as of then, when we just passed the Constitution, the 1995 Constitution, it gives a very clear, it gave Uganda a very clear future. In fact, a comparison to other regional constitutions, you'll see that the 1995 Constitution is very progressive, at least as of then, and sought to ensure that the rule of law in a country is upheld and that democracy can be nurtured and grow. Now, the reality on ground is very different, and there are a couple of things that I would agree with Professor. In light of the ability of Parliament to exercise its mandate independently, but also deliberately and independently its decisions to contribute to the growth of the country. Of course, there are realities that we must be alive to, where you have countries like Uganda, where you have the president enjoying overwhelming power. And he amasses all the power and holds both the carrot and the stick. And at all time, he can use either of those to achieve whichever desires that he really wants. And that is what you can see in all these processes of the amendment of the Constitution, some being extreme. The viewers may know the amendment of the age limit, the term limits, and some of those extreme amendments that waters down the Constitution as envisaged in 1995. Of course, part of that as to why the executive has had to go away with so many of us is the power that the executive, specifically the president, enjoys. Because even within the executive, it's a summary of the president. You have ministers who cannot take any decision. You have ministers who can hardly make decisions. And that even on simple matters, they have to ask, what does the president think? So it goes to tell you that everything is premised and starts and ends with the presidency, which greatly affects how Parliament contributes to the development of the country. A couple of examples really, just to strengthen the argument, is that we've seen in the recent past the ability of Parliament when it comes to legislation. There are so many legislations that Parliament has passed that while they may enjoy the power, you'll see that first of all it has been overwhelmingly pushed, and it's being pushed on their throats to pass. And some of those include the budget. Budget is also a law that has to be passed by Parliament. And many times, and the truth is that you'll find that the executive brings business to Parliament. And the assumption is that Parliament will look into this and exercise their discretion in guiding the executive. But unfortunately, what we see is that the executive are hell-bent in having their way. On matters to do with accountability, for example, we've seen parliaments overwhelmingly keeping quiet on things that even are going wrong. Let's say the abuse of human rights, something that was envisaged in the 1995 Constitution, that Parliament will protect this. We've seen people being killed, we've seen people being abducted, we're seeing journalists being tortured while at work, and so many of these things that are happening, which is very unfortunate. You are seeing what the opposition, the former opposition leader, Kizza Besigye, is going through. Those are just some of the examples that you see that Parliament should actually come very strong and demand for clear direction in some of this. But you see Parliament not coming out very strong in addressing some of those things. Look at the matters on how the executive has chosen to utilize the citizens' resources, putting them in Peneti's areas, the Roko, others going to the Luoa. You have the Atiak sugar, you have resources going to... So there's a lot of misuse of resources, or resources that are not clearly put out there for the citizens to understand what is this money doing, what's the value for money, and some of those things. The other, of course, would be the ability of the Parliament to clearly push the aspirations and the desires of the people. Because the people, Parliament is a summary of the people. And that the assumption is that Parliament should reflect and should aspire to push the needs of the people so that the executive can act on them. Unfortunately, you'll see that many times as we stand today, it is the leaders' needs that seem to take the day as opposed to the people. And what that means is that you'll find the people are left out, and you have the leaders, pushing for their agendas, which greatly waters down the 1995 Constitution. And so I think that while Parliament would enjoy the legal mandate to protect, to champion the rule of law, to protect the Constitution, the existing circumstances, the structure within the country does not allow them to exercise and to champion that. A number of things could inform that. Others could be self-inflicted. You'll see that on matters, even administrative issues that really don't have no relations with the executive, you'll see that there is total failure. You'll see that there is poor leadership in how some of those things have been handled. And you see how laws are being managed. Even the resources, we've recently seen the exhibition that the countrymen and women were putting out on social media, and you saw the abuse of office that actually came out there. You could see the abuse of resources and how some of those monies are being used. We've seen that institutions have actually failed to actually exercise what their mandate is. Okay, the ability to exercise this mandate is greatly compromised. And that once you have Parliament in a very disorganized manner, or it's in a unstructured way, the ripple effect is heavy. What that means is that other institutions that should be reporting to Parliament will also be failing, or will not have the capacity to ensure that you have, let's say, for example, IGG, who is supposed to look into matters to do corruption, propose prosecution, and all these things, but report to Parliament, give a report to Parliament. You have the Human Rights Commission. You have all these entities that are supposed to, again, go before Parliament. And so once you have Parliament that does not stand up to the aspirations and how the 1995 Constitution had envisaged some of these things, you definitely have a failed structure and failed system. And so they are not able to hold the executive accountable. And so what that means is that the executive will have their way all the time as and how they want it. So Parliament becomes a rubber stamp and a place where the leaders cut deals and express their interests. Yeah.
Eliakim, the experts have weighed in. I now want to listen to a citizen's perspective. You are aspiring to join Parliament, which is the body that is primarily charged with the protection of the Constitution. Of course, the judiciary. I
thought he was an expert. He's a lawyer.
I want to pick his perspective first as a citizen. Yes, the judiciary interprets the Constitution, but of course the implementation largely lies with the executive and Parliament. Do you feel satisfied with the performance of Parliament in as far as the component of its mandate to protect the Constitution is concerned, as a citizen?
Thank you very much. One, I want to start by saying that people vote, but most likely they don't know the rules of member of Parliament. But you go down there and you ask for votes, and someone will vote you, but you don't know the role of the member of Parliament. You don't even know whether the member of Parliament has actually done what he's supposed to be doing as a member of Parliament. So, as citizens, some of them, they may think that my member of Parliament is working because he attended my burial, he attended my wedding, he contributed for me. From citizen perspective, someone will look at that as my member of Parliament is performing. So now when you look at the broader picture of the roles of member of Parliament vis-a-vis the Constitution we have and what is happening in the country, you see the member of Parliament, they are supposed to enact laws, as we all know, and for the peace, good governance, and the order of the country. And you find the members of Parliament, some are doing good job, others are doing something totally different, or they are compromised, or they don't want to be seen as if they are not in line with the executive, which is really not supposed to be the case. So when you look at the number of members of parliament and the kind of work they do, you could say some are doing their job, others are failing them because they want to be, they don't want to be seen as if they are not in support of the executive or the ruling government, which is NRM. Now, when you look, what we need to do as citizens or any other person that I would encourage, that we need to sensitize communities. We need to let people know the roles of members of parliament. We need people should know the constitution, because the constitution is the supreme law of our country, but people don't know. There's a provision in the constitution that the state should create a public awareness of the constitution. It should be translated in different languages of this country, and people should get that information. Do you have a constitution in any local language? Do we?
Yes, we do.
So do people know about
but
it?
But do those who know English put it into practice?
Now that's the thing. One, if it's there and people know it, are they aware about the provision of the constitution? If we have a constitution that is translated, I don't know, you will tell us which languages have the constitution.
Even Sabine.
Or the four, or more than four.
Yes.
Yeah, more than four.
And if there's time to, it's not only translating, you translate, then you also disseminate the information to the citizens. So after translating the constitution, if it's translated, are people now aware about their rights, the issues to do with accountability? Do citizens know that actually someone is holding a public office in his interest, not in his interest, in the interest of the citizens? Or do we know that we are supposed to hold our leaders accountable? If you're in any leadership position or a position of any responsibility, you are supposed to be answerable, or you are answerable to the citizens. But do citizens know that if you're in public office, or if you're holding any position, are you answerable to the citizens? So if we cannot, it's until we create that kind of awareness and people get to know that the leader, I'm voting for someone who's going into parliament to take my views, to take my opinion, or to represent me. Not that you're going into parliament to do something totally different, or you're pushing for your own interests. So people should know, everyone should know, every citizen should know that this constitution we are talking about, this supreme law of the land, is to help us realize our interests, our rights are protected. But if they don't know, they will look like government is doing them a favor. Like if you go to any government institution to get service and you're served, assuming that you're served well, then someone should know that that's what they're supposed to be doing. The government officials, the public officers, they are supposed to serve the citizens. But the citizens they should be let to know that someone, the government officer, is serving them and is not doing them a favor. You're just doing them a service. So if you're not serving them, you're doing them a disservice. So citizens should know that. Now, if members of parliament are not doing their job, or government officials are not doing this job, then the citizens will rise up and fight for their rights. It's my right to be served. If I go to police to report my case, I should be served. If I go to any government office to get service, I should be served. So if I'm not served, I should raise a complaint to relevant offices, because the offices are there, the structures are there, but people don't know. You reach at the, let's say maybe at court, and you're not getting the service, you're not served, and there's backlog and all this, but citizens, they don't know what to do next. So they go back home. When you go to, we talk about maybe police, because I worked in police, and someone has not been helped. So what next? We just go back home. Why? Because he's not aware that if I'm not helped in this office, I can go to the next office, or I can report my case here. And who is supposed to be doing that? So if we're saying the members of parliament are supposed to protect the constitution, and the constitution provides that everyone should get information, you're representing citizens. So if you're representing citizens in parliament, and you feel like citizens are not getting the services they are supposed to get, are you holding someone who's in that position of responsibility, do you raise those issues? Are they being punished in one way or the other? So that if you're not doing your work as a government official, then they should be, you should be penalized for not doing your work, and citizens should be able to get services. So of course the members of parliament are supposed to do an oversight role. So if they go into your constituency as a member of parliament, as one of your role to do an oversight, if government programs are working, if the stakeholders are doing their work, and you get complaints from the people you represent, so what do you do next as a member of parliament? If you find there is a problem in your constituency, maybe there was a program to, like these programs that we are seeing, government programs, or even these well-structured government offices, and there's a complaint, maybe the schools, the headmaster is not at school, people are not getting services, you go to health centers and the doctors are not there, the health workers are not doing their work. And as a member of parliament, so what are you doing to help citizens to know that my people are entitled to get these services, but they're not getting services in my constituency? So what have you done about it as a member of parliament? That means you are not protecting the constitution as you're supposed to be doing it. So I think we need to join hands together as a country to make sure that everyone, citizens should know their rights. Citizens should know that they are entitled, because if you have to speak about the citizens' perspective, like the local person at the village level, they should know that they are entitled to these services. If you go to a hospital, it's a government hospital, and they're telling you, we don't have this, or the doctor is not there, and you're not getting the, they should know that they should ask to be served, because someone who's responsible, is in that position and is responsible for giving services to the citizens is not doing it. So what are we doing to make sure that our citizens are enjoying their rights, are enjoying they're getting the services they are supposed to be getting? So it's everyone's responsibility. Now, when you look at the other role of member of parliament, like representation, is representing the citizens from your constituency. So if you're in parliament, you know that you are there on behalf of people. You are representing the people who voted for you, those voters. So if you're in parliament, if you reach in parliament, make sure that whatever you're doing should be in line with the aspirations of people, or should be in the interest of the Ugandans, in the interest of the people that voted you into power. Go to the judiciary. The judicial powers are derived from the people. When you look at the judicial powers of the judicial officers, their powers are derived from the people, and they're supposed to be exercised in aspirations and the norms of the people. So if you know that what you're doing is not in line with the interests of people, that means you're doing them a disservice. And now, if the citizens don't know about that, and you are in parliament, and you know that as a judicial officer, the judicial officers are supposed to be giving services to citizens, and they're not doing their work. So as a member of parliament, what have you done? Do you have any, is there something that you have done, a remedy for the citizens? So if you have not done that, that means you're doing a disservice to the citizens. Because if they're not getting the services they're supposed to be getting, so as a member of parliament, you are supposed to raise those issues, because you have powers and act laws, as you have said, for the peace, order, and good governance. So if we have issues to do with the recent former leader of opposition, saying that he should be, it was the constitutional court that decided,
as you sum up.
Yes, it's the constitutional court that decided that civilians should not be tried into military courts. Now there's, of course, there was an application in the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court by the Attorney General.
Yeah, by the Attorney General to not to enforce that. Now, and it has taken, I mean, like 3-4 years without deciding on it. So what is Parliament helping Ugandans in line to that? Is there something that they can do about it as members of Parliament? So if you're saying that you have powers to enact laws for the peace and order and good governance, and you're saying that the citizens are being tried in a military court, And as members of parliament, it's not an issue. You have not seen it as an issue, or you have not discussed it in parliament. Say that, what do we do? That one should be everyone's concern. What are members of parliament helping us? Or if you're going to vote, and it can be possible. Some people say that all hope is not lost. The citizens should know that their vote should be their voice and should be their power. Someone will say that no, we vote them, they reach in parliament and they do something totally different. So that means when he comes back, don't vote them.
Thank you, Eliakim, for sharing your perspective. Professor, I want us to build on the point of the systematic failure of the parliament to protect the constitutional rights of the ordinary citizen. In the constitution, we have a whole component called the Bill of Rights, which outlines the fundamental rights and liberties of all citizens in the country. But let us bring the Besigye incident in sharper focus. We have a prominent national leader, a citizen, who goes on a personal visit in a neighboring country, and they are arbitrarily arrested by the state, repatriated back forcefully against their will, and then they are arraigned in a military court-martial, despite a landmark decision of the Constitutional Court to actually intervene and say that violates the constitutional rights of a citizen. And then we have a paradoxical case of the Attorney General of the country, who goes now to the Supreme Court and argues that such a decision should be stayed until the Supreme Court can settle a challenge, an appeal by the state. So I want to ask the question, how do we deal with this conundrum where the parliament cannot protect the citizen against the excesses of the state?
Thank you for that question. You see, issues of power are not necessarily in the abstract. That because it is written in the Constitution that power belongs to the people, or Parliament has a constitutional role to make laws, you say, but for me it is passing bills, passing laws that are dictated to them by the executive. I remember when we were doing nationalism, even at the class level in high school, we used to meet quotes of our leaders, I think Nkrumah, Kaunda, and whatever, when they were doubting the independence we have. I think one goes like this, that independence in Africa was given through the right hand and taken away by the left hand. Another one went like this, that independence was given through the door and taken through the window. And so with these powers we are talking about, powers given by the Constitution to the people and powers given to the Parliament to protect the Constitution, were given to the people and to Parliament by the Constitution through the right hand, taken away by the left hand, and through the door through the window. So, but allow me, since we are speaking English, and I expect that people who can follow the English can also follow these concepts and the definitions, allow me to engage in some of these intellectual definitions, following on what my colleague there talked about, awareness. There is a scholar, I don't know how many of you here are teachers, but it is a prominent educationist, the most prominent in the 20th century, by the way, Paulo Freire. He makes a distinction between awareness and consciousness. Awareness is about knowing. So knowing your rights and powers and mandates is one thing, practicing them is another. So to him, to practice what you are aware of is consciousness. So you could say some citizens in Uganda are aware of their rights and privileges and powers, but they have not become conscious. They have not reached a time of putting what they are aware of into action, or doing something about your rights. So when you are aware of your rights and privileges and powers, and you translate them into action, he calls that consciousness. So Ugandans are aware, but they are not conscious. I hope people can get it from there, can even go and read it. But similarly, if I can take people to Marxism, which I have heard even people talking about in Changwan's classes and whatever, Marx did say, referring to classes, that you can be a class in yourself without being a class for yourself. What does that mean? Being a class in yourself as like the peasants or the workers, you know that you are a worker, you know that you are a peasant, but it is until you become a class for yourself, i.e., until you do something about your plight, about your condition, you are not yet a class for yourself. You are a class in yourself, but not a class for yourself. You are aware that you are poor and a peasant, and you are poor because the rich are responsible for your poverty, but you have not done something to get rid of that plight of yours, that condition of yours. So you are not yet a class for yourself. So translated in what you are asking is that Ugandans and Parliament, they know that they are entitled to certain powers as given by the Constitution in abstract, in theory, but they have not put them into practice to emancipate themselves. So you find that the state, ideally, ordinarily, is supposed to emancipate the people, liberate the people. But you find it can be an instrument for repressing the people. Actually, this has been recently stated by Mao, just last week, I think during the constitutional debate organized by CCG, that at times we think the state is liberating and emancipating, but it is repressing the people. So, the constitution we have spells out some of these human rights, the Bill of Rights, but the Bill of Rights are only on paper. They are not practiced. And Parliament sometimes becomes powerless because giving you power, the Constitution giving you power doesn't mean that you have power. It says power belongs to the people. But which people have power anyway? Which people? You tell me. Where is the power in Uganda? You citizens listening to me, tell me that you have the powers to change things, many things in Uganda. That you have powers to stop this extravagance in the government, where people are paying themselves. I'm told there is a civil servant in Uganda who is paid 70 million per month. And the others are earning 300,000. So, about applicability to what we are talking about in respect, like say, of people are arraigned to a court where they are not supposed to be. Even court pronounced itself, citizens pronounced themselves about it, but the executive continued to do the opposite. And people are powerless, or they have made themselves powerless. I've heard people are empowered. There is nobody, I am telling the citizens there, that there is nobody who will empower you. We citizens have to empower themselves, and they have to go beyond merely being aware and become conscious. In other words, going beyond knowing to putting in practice. Otherwise, if we don't follow the law and go by what the law says, we are not going to be a civilized community. Because a civilized community must go by the rules of the day that are spelled out. Otherwise, man by nature, here I include woman, is somehow selfish. And power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts. There are those tendencies in human beings. So, the people who began civilization, the Greeks especially, the Greeks are the ones who first philosophically came up with some of these separation of powers, rule of law and things like that, and then it was more or less perfected by European philosophers and then practiced by some governments in Europe, although they haven't become perfect also, because this is an ongoing project. So, for us to have a civilized society, to have an orderly society, we must set ourselves rules and go by those rules. But setting ourselves rules just for the sake of using them as instruments of amassing power and wealth is making our societies not orderly. But unfortunately, the citizens of Uganda, whom I call subjects, they are not yet citizens. Because to be a citizen, you must translate from being a subject to a citizen. In other words, you must be conscious and fight for your rights. It is our history which is maybe taking us to this, our historical experience. You know why Southeast Asia is overtaking us? It is because Southeast Asia has a different historical experience. The British or the French came and colonized us in our different communities and left us like that, but in this hodgepodge called Uganda. So we have a Uganda without Ugandans. But if you go to Southeast Asia, for example, who were also colonized, in their historical experience, Chinese were colonized as Chinese and were left as Chinese. The Koreans were Koreans before colonization and they were left as Koreans. The Indians the same. The Malaysians the same. But here, they colonized people as Baganda, but they were left as Ugandans. They were colonized as Bachiga, but they are left as Ugandans. The different identities with their names, they lost their names, but they lost their names in name, but in practice we are still thinking as tribal enclaves. So that historical experience has weakened citizenship. So we more or less emphasize local citizenship of your tribe, of your ethnic group, of your identity, the local identity, not the big identity as the Ugandan identity. And therefore, when some members of society go into the struggles for emphasizing the practice of human rights, of the Bill of Rights, of practicing constitutionalism and having a constitution, they are left hanging. They are not supported. They are not supported by the citizens, whom I am calling subjects. Because if there was a political cost to flouting constitutional procedures and rules, if there was a political cost, those in power would behave. But once they know there is no political cost to flouting rules and regulations and the constitution, they will continue flouting the constitution. Is there a political cost in Uganda or indeed in Africa for somebody violating the constitution? My answer is no, because this has happened very many times through different manipulation, and citizens sit back, say, what can we do? That is Uganda. Well, all human beings have that corrupt tendencies. This corruption you see in financial matters and monetary matters is actually more embedded in political corruption. Political corruption is the mother of financial corruption. As long as we have allowed political corruption to exist, beginning, you are talking about these MPs. How can the MPs protect a constitution when they themselves are elected violating the constitution? Because the constitution doesn't say we should be corrupt. But you ask anybody who wants to stand, including him, they are looking for money to corrupt the people. They are looking for money to bribe for coming into power. So if people can come into power corruptly, how do you expect them to stand against corruption? They go to parliament and they start awarding themselves a lot of monies at the expense of the population. They go to parliament to fight. You know, they don't even have decorum. So if people do not have decorum in parliament, if people do not respect parliament and avoid being corrupt, if people cannot stand on their ground to fight for the constitution, how do you expect citizens to respect them? And how do you expect them to respect the constitution? So we are in a quagmire, in a situation where these peasants he's talking about, these citizens he's talking about, who may not mind. They may not mind because they are what I would call, they have a high sense of survival. They have a high sense of survival, and they say, look here, even if I talk, what will change anyway, even if I talk? You know, in 1980, I was a youth for UPM, and we used to be asked by citizens, you young people, we hear you are making sense in what you are talking about. But even if we vote you, will you be in power? Do you have power? Milton Obote had already said, asked Chemonges, where are your commanders? So because they have got a high sense of survival, they say, Nzemundeke, I am going to vote UPC because after all, they are going to come in power, and I expect to get justice from them, services from them, and therefore, even if you are making sense in what you are talking about, me, I'm going to do the opposite because of the reality, the vulnerability of the political atmosphere, of the political landscape, of the political environment, of the situation within. But how can the elites, those who know and are conscious and should become conscious, lead the masses in making sure that we hold accountable those in state power to follow the constitution, and we have an orderly society?
That's food for thought. Thanks for your perspective, Professor. Focus on Parliament now takes a short break. Do stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
You're still watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. In this segment, we continue examining the role of Parliament as far as the mandate to protect the Constitution is concerned. Tim, let me come to you now. Having highlighted all those challenges, how do we propose solutions? Which areas could we focus on in light of the current political environment to ensure that Parliament's capacity to protect the Constitution is reinforced?
So I think that first is to have these institutions be in a place as we had envisaged, really, in the 1995 Constitution. And most of these, you can categorize some in administrative, others are just pure failure within the administrative structures. But, you know, majority of it falls within the political landscape in the country, which, of course, goes to the extent of how we have the citizens part of this process, but also ultimately the accountability mechanisms within the structures. So I agree with the submissions that we have to get in a place where the people are both aware and they are conscious to participate in this process, to be able to have a meaningful development, really, so that you have people being part of this, but also, you know, demanding for better, demanding for clear accountability, and going, you know, even to the extent of, because again, you have the people holding the power, and how much of that goes into determining who becomes the leader, how they offer the leadership, and what are the consequences of that kind of system. We've seen how, and just looking at our electoral landscape, for which we bring on board our leaders at all levels, there are quite a lot that is still wanting. And some of those, of course, they are desirable towards, you know, the reforms that are being suggested in the amendments, which, of course, again, we are late. But you'll notice that there's still a gap between the political actors and the people. Two, I think that we seem to have a lot of power that is centered within the presidency, and that, as Prof mentioned, absolute power corrupts absolutely. If that power is not utilized well, it's likely to be at the detriment of the country. And so there's need for depowering, if there's something like that, to a bit reduce the amount of power that the president can have in the country. Secondly, I think that we have to ensure that we strengthen our political parties. I hold the view that as a country, we've had people pay the price for our democratic dispensation, and we've seen people like Besige, some of those in the opposition, they have done their best to get us where we are at. And so the missing gap is having to galvanize a bigger number of people, both the elite and the general public, to join this bandwagon. But also, more importantly, is to, I think most of us seem not to appreciate the crisis that we are currently going through, and we seem to have normalized that. Every time you see people dying because they couldn't have access to the hospital, you have a number of people dying, and it's not taken that seriously. You have, we've been doing some work around road safety, and we lose on a daily an average of 13 to 15 people in a day, you know, which is, we call them road crashes. In a week, you are losing up to an average of 100 people. Every day, every week, you are losing an average of 100 people, which is quite a big number. Looking at diseases that we should be addressing, such as malaria, you lose on a daily, actually, according to the reports, up to around 30, the number is quite big. The number of people that we lose in situations that we would have prevented, it's a big crisis. Every time that resources that these institutions should be protecting as allocated are not used rightly, it goes to affect the citizen. The other, I think that I partly agree with what Prof has said in light of the actual and the real power that is exercised. I know for a fact that while Parliament is indeed mandated to exercise, say, the mandate of budgeting, the actual power is not with the Parliament. The actual power lies with the executive because of a number of reasons. One, I think that, you know, budget is an instrument is brought by the government, and looking at how it's actually stipulated within the Constitution, you'll notice that the Public Finance Amendment Act suggests that when the executive brings the budget to Parliament, they're only allowed to alter it to a tune of 12%.
Only.
Only.
Oh.
And what that means is you remove it's a reallocation, and only to 12%. The ability of Parliament to actually make changes or even demand for any changes on the MTF, the midterm reports and that kind of thing, it's not there. So you find that Parliament is left with very limited power in practice, but a lot of power in the Constitution. You look at how the recent game plan, how things turned out when Parliament was passing the 2024-25 budget, where, you know, Parliament, after receiving the budget, they reallocated the resources as of how they thought should have been allocated to the areas that they thought needed priority. You know, we saw the president coming out very, very tough on them and asking them to toe the line lest they, you know. So you see that Parliament enjoys the institution that the people look up to. Their powers are not as actual as they seem to be displayed. The powers to do with legislation. Again, much of the laws comes from the executive, and much of the business that Parliament transacts, you know, predominantly comes from government. And so you find that there is a lot coming from government, which is okay, definitely, because government is the body that should be doing this. But the objectivity in handling what is brought is where the problem lies. The ability of actually the executive to act and take action on what our representative should be presenting on the floor of Parliament. We've seen so many of those. We've seen members of Parliament bringing out many of these issues. But the receptiveness and the ability of the executive to act on them, you find there's a bit of resistance. So ultimately, you see that Parliament is equally a victim in this situation. That we need to work towards, first of all, protecting the institution of Parliament against the overbearing nature of the executive. And in that situation, the ability of Parliament to exercise its mandate is compromised. And when now resources and money, when the executive has to, you know, use the resources to have their way in Parliament, when the executive has to use force to push some of these things. You've seen recently in the coffee bill, it's very, very unfortunate that you see the army, or I don't know which arm of the forces entered Parliament and caused chaos and were beating members of Parliament and throwing them within the institution of Parliament, a place that members of Parliament should enjoy protection, but also they should be able to be availed with a space to exercise their mandates. To that extent, you see that Parliament is in a place that cannot execute their mandate independently, let alone discussing the current leadership of Parliament. That by all means and purposes, I think they have handed over the institution to the executive, and I think the executive, you know, is having their day within the institution. So every time I think the president asks the Parliament to jump, I think the response is how high. Yeah. So I think it's a very unfortunate, but ultimately I think that we need to ensure that we strengthen our systems, strengthen our institutions, so that they're able to serve the intended purpose for which they were established.
Thanks, Tim, for your perspective. Eliakim, even as you prosecute your ambition to join Parliament, what do you think would be the priority areas for you with respect to constitutionalism, if you were to achieve your dream?
I think my priority would be in letting people know of their rights, and also to tell them that the power still belongs to people. Because I'm going to give an example. Professor, don't agree with that the people are within, that people have the power. But now I'm going to give an example of the recent or the previous elections. We all saw what happened in the central, whereby the new National Unity Platform got many members of Parliament, and people voted. And I think people can make a difference. If you wake up in the morning, you go and cast your vote, knowing that this member of Parliament has not been helpful. And it can be overwhelming. You know, you can get so many votes, and even when people are thinking about rigging and all that, it will be overwhelming. So citizens need to know that they have powers to make a difference in our country. So we should not feel that no, even if I vote, or nothing will happen. No, things will change because they happened and we saw it happening. So it's everyone's responsibility to know that I can make a difference. I wake up in the morning because the politicians you're talking about, the members of parliament you're talking about, it's us that to vote them into power. So if they have not done what you think they are supposed to be doing, don't give them your vote. So, and of course, people will think about money, they are going to bribe us here, they give us money. So, but we're telling people that no, just look at Uganda, don't be selfish. And also for politicians, not to be selfish, the judicial officials, not to be selfish, because if you are like a chief justice or a judge, and you're going to make a decision, you don't need to first consult the executive. Should I write this judgment? So we're saying that everyone should take up the responsibility in whichever position you're in. Like if you're a member of parliament, do the right thing as a member of parliament. If you are a citizen and you're going to cast your vote, go and vote for someone that you know is going to advance your opinions or your rights, or is going to do the right thing. Not that because someone has given you money, so you're going to take this decision. The same applies to the government officials. Just do what you're supposed to do as a citizen. So I think if I get into parliament, my focus would be on empowering citizens, letting people know that they can create the change they want to see. If you have a right to vote, and your vote should be your right, because all the things that you're talking about, they can be turned around, they can be changed with a mere vote. Or that people think it's a myth or it's not possible, but it's possible and it can be achieved. So everyone should encourage Ugandans. People should know that they have powers, and the power is in their vote and also in their voice. If something is not happening in the right, is not taking the right direction, stand up and say it out, because we have seen people protesting and things change around. So the Ugandans should know they have the responsibility to stand up for their rights and also to be patriotic. And being patriotic does not necessarily mean that you're NRM or you support whichever political party. No, being patriotic is whatever you're doing should be in the interest of your country. So if you can all focus on that, and we leave out our selfish interests and we focus on how best can we build our country, and especially the young generation. We are big numbers. If you look at the percentage, we are over 60%. So if all the young generation can say, where are we heading to as a country? And we stand up and say, no, we all know the right thing, let's do that. We say that now this is the right thing to do. They call it political culture, but me, I see this is that the narrative of saying that things cannot change, we need to do this, and of course we start lamenting here and there. That one should change, and we stand up and say, as Ugandans, this is what you think is going to take us ahead. Stand up for your rights and cast your vote. Encourage people to vote. Like if the member of parliament is not helping or is corrupt or whatever is doing is contrary to what will help the citizens, then let people name and shame. Say this member of parliament is not helping us. If he is a judicial officer and it's whatever the judicial officer is doing is not in line with the aspirations of people, or is not doing the right thing, people should name and shame. People should tell them that no, what you're doing is not the right thing that you're doing. But you find the Ugandans or citizens are the ones even fueling it, and we keep quiet. So if we stand up as Ugandans...
Actually, when you do the right thing, people will run away from you.
And now that's what we need to tell people, because we cannot keep lamenting. We need to tell people that this is the right thing, and they know that this is the right thing to do. And of course the number is going to increase of the right-minded people who will be looking at the right thing. What is the right thing to do? And people will start doing the right thing. So we shouldn't get tired of letting people know that this is the right thing to do. We talked about the revolution. I think when the President Museveni was going into the bush, very few people believed in him. They said that, what are they doing? As you say, that UPM, they look at you and they think that you're nothing or you don't mean anything. But we don't need to get tired. We need to fight on as Ugandans. We need to fight for our rights. We need to keep on telling people this is the right thing to do. and at the end of the day, people will get to know. And it should be everyone's conviction. Like, this is the right thing that we need to do, and people should know that. I spend most of my time in the village, and I can assure you, most people don't know their rights, or they take things for granted, or they feel like it's not going to make a difference. But it's until you keep on telling them the same thing, and they'll say, anyway, I'm going to vote for you, I'm going to do this, because they will start understanding this is the right thing to do, and everyone should get to know. So this information that we give Ugandans, it should go into the roots, the LC level. Because President Museveni said that he has his people.
Incidentally, LC elections are going to be postponed again.
So
and
now
the people will keep quiet.
You see, now people at the village level, and also we empower the local leaders, the religious leaders, because for them they have a platform where they can access the peasants, and they speak them and they listen to them. So if we can have that civic education, and we sensitize communities, we sensitize religious leaders, the local leaders at local level, we tell them this is the right thing to do. It's your right to get services from the government. Government is not doing you a favor, giving you those services, but we tell them it's your right and you're entitled to it, and you should actually demand for it. So we shouldn't get tired as Ugandans. We should keep on bombarding people with that message. So we should keep on telling that message and tell them it's possible. I gave you an example of the Central, what happened. So that information can still move to Ugandans, and they get to know to choose the leaders that will help them. Because if you look at the members of parliament, they are the Ugandans, the peasants we talk about, that will put them into power. So if they reach there, we should say that if your member of parliament is not performing, don't vote him next time. Look for a member of parliament who's going to put out your voice. So it's everyone's responsibility, Isaac, that we should take this information to the lowest level, that everyone should get to know that my vote is my voice, so I can cause a change just by me going to the polling station in the morning and take whoever leader I know that this leader is going to help me take my country to the next level.
Eliakim, as a citizen and an aspiring member of parliament, are there any specific revisions to the constitution you would like to see or advocate for personally?
Yes. I think in my opinion about the term limits. Term limits should be restored in the constitution, and also the age limit. Professor, I think there's a time we were talking about, I don't know if it was professor, but someone said that no, the age limit can remain, but at least we restore the age limit, the term limit.
What would be the justification?
The justification for the term limit, because now when you put the term limits, you come, you serve. After you're serving, other leaders will come up. So you know that you have served for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But like, for example, I can give an example. In my constituency, we have an written constitution whereby you serve only 2 terms. After 10 years, you know that even if you come, people will not give you votes. You will run, because it has never happened. So only 2 terms, then you go, then another person, like that. So you find when you come in and you know that it's your 2 terms, go and serve your people, so that even other leaders, you give them an opportunity also to come in and serve, because we know people have different aspirations. They have different things that drive them. You find if the President Museveni, his passion was about security, and he has come with that, the security and has been stabilized. If you get another leader, his passion is about maybe education, health sector, then that person will come with that, so that I want to improve.
What would be the rationale for the age limit? Yes.
The age limit. So what's the age limit for public servants? Is it 60?
60.
So we can say, no, I'm not saying that
you would exclude professor.
No, I'm not saying about the public service, but I'm looking at.
I didn't benefit from the age limit removal.
So, I can say that we can look at
I have retired.
someone who is energetic and can still perform, maybe like 70. You can say like maybe 70 or 75. I don't know, maybe that's the area that can be discussed. But there should be an age limit whereby say that if you have worked 70, at least you go and prepare, you retire. So we shouldn't burden you. Why
But
should we burden
is there
you?
an insurance that the one who wants benefit and has power will not remove it again?
Now that's what we need to fight. Like Ugandans, if we come in and the member of parliament say no, We have our age limit. We should respect our constitution. So, like, you know, someone is 70 years or 75. I think you should be preparing to relax. You look at your animals or whatever you have, and people will come to you for advice for that matter. And now, when you have this young generation coming in, they have vigor, they have energy, they can work out things. So may I still advocate for the age limit and also restoring the term limits for all leaders, not even for member of parliament. Even for the president, even the member of parliament. You just put that
across the board.
Limit. Yes, put term limit if you've clocked maybe 3 or 4 terms, like 2 terms or 3. They say now here you've served your term, so allow other people also to do what? To go and serve. It's for eating, as Professor put it. Then you also eat and go, then another person will come and eat. But of course it will be service.
So there is a balance of eating.
So
Interesting.
You shall end up eating the country.
It will be service. So you want eating to be for one person to eat. So it will be service. Come in, serve for 10, 5 or 20 years, then go away. Allow another person to come and serve, because you cannot. Knowledge cannot be a reserve of one person. You have your own aspirations, as I said. Your passion is about education. So that means if you come in, you're going to focus on education. After 10 years, another person will come in, the focus is about health sector. The person is going to focus about on health. Then when someone is on security, and you give him like 20, 30 years, the person is going to focus on security, even when it is stable, because his mind is on security, the person is going to focus on security. And you cannot blame him, because that's his passion.
Thank you, Eliakim, for your views. Prof, even as you sum up, I would like to pick your mind on the aspect of the constitutional restraints on power. The question of the term limits, I think that we have achieved unanimous consensus across the board from the wider citizenry of the country. But the question of the age limit, is there a thing scientifically that when you attain a certain age, you are no longer cognitively or mentally agile to steer the affairs of a country? Because we've seen many examples of elder presidents, even in continental Europe, in America. The current president is 81. He has his challenges, but that's an exception. Trump is 78.
You are answering your question.
No, I want to pick I want to pick your view, because I, for one, I do not think the constraint of age limit is really necessary if we have the term limit. But what's your view, speaking about the broader constitutional restraints on political power?
Before I come to that, I will repeat myself at the risk of boring you, is that the issue of the constitutional safeguards is not lack of them. It is a question of not practicing the provisions that are even there as we think. Like these constitutional amendments we have made. I think the 1995 constitution was good enough, and it could be amended here and there later, but if the powers that be were about believing in the Constitution, in the spirit of the Constitution, not the letter, the letter of the Constitution and the spirit of the Constitution, it would have done very well. But look at the amendments that have been made. Nearly all the amendments, and they are very many, possibly by now more than 100. The amendments that have been made have been to strengthen the power of the executive and weaken the power of citizens. Look at them. Nearly all of them. We are not for strengthening the power of the citizens, for which we say power belongs to the people. They were for strengthening the power of the executive. So coming to your question of age limit, I want to tell citizens, by the way, some may not believe it. They say they were stopping Obote from coming here. No, I myself, I'm the one who put it there. I'm the one who proposed it, not put it there. I was a researcher in the Constituent Assembly, and I had an experience of President Bojiba, Hajib Bojiba of Tunisia, who had clocked 80 plus and had become senile. And the country was going into a crisis. And there was nothing that could be done. There had to be a coup. His vice president, together with the army, they had to come and remove Bojiba to his house and take over unconstitutionally. And I didn't want that constitutional instability in Uganda. And I can tell citizens that actually the age limit, I repeat it here, was not, even in the constitution, the one which was removed, was not 75 years. It was 80. And that's the one I proposed to Honorable Mayombo. 80, not 75. And Honorable Apakaburo, we went and talked to him. I was a researcher, the other one was a CA delegate. He said, no, that's not how we constitutionalize laws. Let's not put the age limit at 80. Let's say that you are not eligible to stand at 75. You can only be eligible to stand at 75, meaning you could literally, legally, technically stand at the age of 74 and 11 months and be in office as president at 79 years and 11 months, which is more or less 80 years. So the age limit was really 80 years. And recently, President Museveni supported that position when he was talking on NBS, being interviewed by NTV by Kamara. He said, I think, scientifically speaking, after the age of 75, your vigor has come down. And there was a consensus on that issue in Parliament. By the way, to digress a bit, when I suggested that one to Mayombo as a researcher, I had in mind an unfortunate incident in Mpororo, where he comes from. We had a kingdom in southwestern Uganda, the largest actually, larger than Buganda, larger than Bunyoro. It was called Mpororo Kingdom. It disintegrated on account of age limit. The king then, Kahayaro Tindajezi, from Ntungamo, he comes from Ntungamo, he knows that, decided not to leave power because he was lucky. In the past, people would not be lucky to go to the age of 80, still alive. They would succumb to nature and die. But for him, he became too old. And his sons requested him to hand over power to them. They were in charge of different constituencies. He thought that was impudence. He didn't believe them anyway, that they shouldn't have suggested that. So he disinherited them. In Runyankore bakweta okubachena, okubachwa, akabachwa. He said, now that being the case, if you people want me to hand over power, I have disinherited you. And they went and carved themselves into different chiefdoms. So the state disintegrated. And the person is supposed, that king is supposed to have even committed suicide. And he's supposed to have hidden the drum, Murorwa. He hid the drum because that was a symbol of power. He said, now that being the case, let him even hide the symbol of power, the drum. And Mpororo disintegrated. It became weak. The colonialists came and added most of Mpororo to Nkore. And that's why it's a funny thing to say, I am a former Mhororo. Can you imagine being a former of an ethnic identity? I'm now a Munyankore, but I'm supposed to be a Mhororo. I'm a former Mhororo. So I thought that we should be saved from such an indignity where some Ugandans would be former Ugandans on account of not having age limit. And the age limits proposed in the constitution, I want to put it to citizens who got it wrong, was not 75. It was 80. Actually, Wapakaburo said that since after you have been elected, you don't hand over power immediately. You spend some 2 months or 3 before you hand over power. So let's leave that room where somebody would clock 80, even if the limit has been put at standing at 74 and 11 months. So that was the advice of Wapakaburo. So that's why I'm putting it to you that it was me who put it there. And that's why I know that the age limit was not 75, it was 79 and 11 months.
Interesting, Prof.
And it should come back because we are going to have somebody who is senile in power. And the Americans recently looked at it and said, Biden, although you claim that you can still be a president, we think that the Biden we knew, who was a firebrand, who could stand with the Trumps and defeat them at a debate. Now he goes to a debate and starts orokosoring. He starts orokosoring. America said this orokoso is not because it is inherently Biden is weak, but because of age. I think stand aside. So it is humanly speaking, at the age of 80, you should be giving way. But anyway, it was removed. Constitutionally, they say members of parliament removed it. Constitutionally, I hope they believed what they were doing. And the reason they were giving is that they didn't want the constitution to be rigid in that article. And yet in the very article, there were rigid provisions to say, to stand as the president, you must be HSC. That was rigidity, wasn't it? But here they said, we have removed it because it was rigid in their wisdom. But I don't think it was wisdom per se. It is because there was a political cost. He is proposing, he hasn't gone there practically to see. He is proposing that a member of parliament can still stand on his ground and vote according to his belief and conscience. But practically, there is a cost to that. Because you have to be a flag bearer. And if you vote against the position of the chief executive and you want to stand in his party, he will not give you he will not grace you to go and stand in his party. Because in Africa, the parties become personalized. When Mr. Teberondwa, Honorable Dr. Teberondwa wanted to, actually at one time, Dr. Teberondwa wanted to stand to be a UPC president, for UPC presidency. You know what Obote told him?
In 80?
No. After. In 85, he wanted now to challenge Obote.
Yes.
Obote told him, Teberondwa, if that is the case, go and found your party. This is my party. Go and found your party. So, as a member of parliament, aspiring and those who are there, it is not very easy to go against the chief executive, the chairman of your party, because you want a grace. And it is not easy for somebody who wants to continue in parliament, because it has become a tradition now. Nobody wants to leave power. It has become a tradition and a culture now that to be in power is to remain in power perpetually. So even members of parliament, because they don't want to have a stop in being in parliament, they will succumb and say, me, I want a flag. I want the go ahead to be a flag. People can go, I can vote the way I want. After all, President Museveni guided. You remember how he guided? He said, he guided peasants, voters. He told them he was somewhere in Busoga. He said, I'm guiding you. Go and vote even if you bring me people who can sleep. It's okay. Rather than voting somebody who can stand his or her ground. I don't mind if you bring me people and they go and sleep, but when they are tapped and say, hey, there is voting and they vote accordingly. You know, that was a guidance. If you don't follow that guidance,
in my constituency where
I have finished.
In my constituency where I come from, the member of parliament, Honorable Tumuzugu Michael Kamujisha, voted against the amendment, and when he came back, we voted for
that
him
is
back.
an exception rather than the rule.
I'm saying that narrative of I have to go by the executive, by principles. No, we are representing people. When you go into parliament, you are representing people, and we should take away that fear from people. Because now, if we keep on fearing that, that means people will not get the representative they need. So if you go and consult your people and they tell you that no age limit, or you restore the age limit, that's what you should come and tell the people. So if you go back and they don't vote you, that means they have betrayed themselves. That's what they told you to do, and you've done it. So I think we need Ugandans, or we need leaders who will stand their ground and say that no, we are going to do the right thing. And that's what Ugandans want. That's what the citizens want.
There is a dilemma.
Yeah, because it's a sacrifice, as we said, even when the
Is
the
it
president-
a classic case of easier said than done?
Yeah, it is a sacrifice because even when the President Museveni was
Yes,
going to
as
the
you
push, as I
conclude.
conclude, it was a sacrifice. He would have chosen to remain in research or whatever position he was in, but he sacrificed and no, let me go and fight for Ugandans, to liberate Ugandans. So if you want to be selfish and say that I want to keep in the comfort zone and to not to be looked at as if I'm against the system, that means that's what you're going to do and that's what you're going to give Ugandans, and we'll keep on coming here making the same noise, shouting no rule of law. But as Ugandans, we should stand for the truth, and it's everyone's responsibility, especially the leaders that we choose. Let's focus on the interests of people because that should be paramount.
Thank you. Tim, your concluding remarks on the program, even as you sum up.
Yeah, so maybe first just to comment a bit on the age limit.
Yes.
And term limits. So I think that I slightly disagree with the colleagues of the school of thought that age is a factor of popular vote. But
What does that entail?
that democracy is anchored on the will of the people. And that if the people see that you are able to grant them or work towards them realizing their aspirations, I think it should be the case.
Just one intervention. You think people in Cameroon think the majority, it is the will of Cameroonians that beer leads them from France?
I think that beers, the dynamics within Cameroon are quite different.
It is an African banana republic
The
ours.
nature, the nature, first of all, Cameroon, first of all, must be looked at in two fronts. The influence and the interest that France has in the country, the structure within the government, but also how the people contribute. The people don't contribute much in how the governance of the country looks like. And so I think that for me, age is not a big factor to the extent that the people can trust you. If Americans, the people who intervened in Biden's situation in the country was the political party, not the people of America. The people, yes, there were a bit of already concerns from the people that I think here there's a bit of a problem. But the political party quickly intervened and said, no, I think at this point in time, less. But to the extent that we can allow, I can only support the age limit for the selfish interest being a young person, that maybe we should be able to send the seniors home and we take charge. But to that end, I giving an example of Museveni, there are so many things that I disagree with his approach, the things that he's done, but I give it to him on the kind of leader he is. His ability to grasp and offer is quite an exception among his colleagues, even to those of us who are young. Of course, his compromises has been in the system for long, and so he will have to compromise so much. But if you have the caliber of President Museveni, I think he's a great leader. Only that the system, he has been there for so long that the structures have held him captive, and so may not do much. But to the extent
But you have shot yourself in the foot. You are saying because he has overstayed, he has captured the structures, and therefore they have no ability to operate and work as institutions.
in the absence
That's what you
of
are
the
saying.
structural constraint and the systemic capture that we already exist, in the absence of that, Museveni would be a great. He would actually take us to the next step. That to the extent that there is a systemic capture, there is failure in his long stay. Anyway,
so if I were to hypothesize the situation, you are saying that if Museveni presented himself today as a candidate, a fresh candidate for election,
never been a president before.
never been,
Yeah.
and we have the constraint of the term limits in place, he would be an ideal candidate.
If I was competing with him, I would support him.
Okay.
But of course, that to the extent that he has been tested, and we can only use what he has done and the kind of person he is, his failures and some of the things that he has done, both good and bad. But nonetheless, I think that we've got to leave it to the people to determine the kind of
But
leader
the
they want.
people's will is constrained. That's the
To the
challenge.
extent, you see, where the will of the people can be exercised, it should be left to them to determine who would be their leaders. But we should restrain for how much this leader can serve. But leave it to, if we wanted, let's say, a younger person, which is not a guarantee, by the way, that we'll have good
No, it's not a
leadership.
guarantee.
It's not a guarantee. We can also have Prof here go to become a president, and he
Take
bangles
us
the country.
another 10 years.
He becomes a terrible person.
I will extend until I'm 80.
You will say the precedent has been set.
Yes,
It's when the bell.
there is no limit. I will go up to 80.
Yeah, but I think that's for my position. But maybe for the closing position, really.
Yes.
I think that we have, as a country, an opportunity to build on this country that we have. It's the only country that we have, and that there's no alternatives to this. And so we have to contribute in whichever way possible, in bettering the governance system, but also in contributing to how the system is. I strongly believe that beyond the Sevenism that has been, colored everywhere, that every time you cough, President Museveni will know. I think that there are a lot of there's a lot of power that these members of parliament, these leadership within the parliament, the speaker, the judiciary have a role to play. Every time, even within the administrative power or within the mandate they have been granted, they can do a lot. And so we have to contribute in holding them accountable and demanding for better. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Timothy and Eliakim, for your able participation on today's edition of Focus on Parliament. Many thanks to our esteemed viewers for your company and for your time and for watching. We appreciate the production department for keeping us live on air. Our esteemed viewers, please engage us on our various social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram. You can also watch this program and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.